So hey there, this is Design Guide Jam session number 26 or so, I think. So as usual, we're here to discuss the progress on the Bitcoin Design Guide, what everyone's working on, review our milestones a little bit, figure out what we want to do next, discuss any blockers, any hot topics, so everybody knows kind of what they want to do for the next 2 weeks and how we collaborate around everything. The roadmap is here in my background. We still have 2 open milestones. One is Lightning refinements, and one is refining the daily spending wallet section. Both of them have actually been around for quite some time. And there's a lot of stuff in progress looking at it here. So in the Lightning refinements, we have adding Lightning content to the glossary. I think Bosch has made good progress on that. And it's just looking for review. Stephen, I think you gave him some feedback on that, right?
Yeah, I didn't like the new images again, so I left requested changes on those. But I left some examples and suggestions and all that. If I'm the only one who doesn't like the images, don't hold it up over me. But I felt they were problematic. Okay. So.
Okay, cool. So we'll just have to work through that. Provide guidance and delayed payments. I just need to wrap that one up. That's not a biggie. That's on me. UX guidance for Lightning channel reserve. Mo is currently has an appointment at her kid's school, so she's not here.
But
do you know?
That's ready. That's ready for more reviews. I started collaborating with her on that one and made some commits, and I think we're ready to get some more reviews on it. I'd like to get some, now that I'm involved in the PR, I'd like to get 2 people other than me to approve it.
Okay, so I could review that one. I already reviewed it and requested changes. Okay, so I'll do a re-review then.
Sounds good.
Cool. Adding content about guiding user towards using Lightning. Stephen, I think you started that one, right?
Yes, I need to. That one you can mark as in progress. I need to convert that from being a draft PR now that your sending page stuff is merged.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, it'd be awesome to wrap this one up. When did we even start this one? It was like months ago. This milestone. So much for our 3-week schedule. Then milestone 16. Actually, let's pull that one up here. Milestones 16. We have 4 closed and we have 9 open still. There's 1 per page. So I'm gonna just pick up a few pages here, like first use. I'll take that one on.
Okay. One thing I'd kind of like to start working on too is, like, since we're trying to make it like a prototype again, I really feel like we need to start like looking at the prototype kind of holistically, like, you know, all of the different flows together and how they work together. So I think one thing we need to do that's not really clearly defined in the issues is actually getting all of the screens into a Figma file and like linked together like a prototype, like we had it before. So I can help with that.
So that's, yeah, the trick thing there is just logistically. So I think there are a couple of ways we could do it. Either we just do all the page reviews, and then we try to turn it into a prototype. So we don't have all of the pages in flux at the same time that we're also trying to standardize them. Or I guess there's a way where we try to do it all at once with nothing being finalized.
I guess my thinking, yeah, we could do all the pages first. I mean, you bring up a good point that it becomes a little bit complex if we're trying to build a prototype over here and then we're trying to build pages over here. I guess I was thinking that, like, if we're just taking it 1 page at a time, we're just thinking about that one given topic, and like we're just thinking about, like, how does the user flow on this page correspond to the topic on this page. But when we see it as a prototype and we put the flows together, we actually see how all these flows interact together and how they support the whole experience of the entire app. And we might have different opinions about it when we see the flows, you know, all corresponding together there in the different app. Like, I noticed that last time when we revised the prototype at the end of the last Lightning sprint, when I was updating Daniel's prototype, and he was giving me a lot of feedback on that. I noticed that when I was having to actually take the flows and string them together into a cohesive user experience, that I started to think about the flows very differently, seeing them all put together. So that's why I was thinking maybe it would be a good idea to get all the flows together in the prototype sooner rather than later. But another approach we could take to that is just finish all the issues for all the individual pages, then go do the completed prototype once the pages are done. And if anything needs to be corrected on the individual pages, go back and correct the individual pages with like minor fixes. So that could be another way of approaching it.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of both too. Right now we could just copy, paste, or drag all of the images in a Figma file and then just see where we are and then just kind of go back and forth. Yeah, I just feel like this daily spending wallet is just dragging for so long right now that we need to cut things in really small pieces so we can keep a good progress. So otherwise we'll be there until end of the year still. Which I guess it's fine if it's the best reference design in the world. Should we go through the other pages real quick, or focus more on other things? I know Bosch has a bunch of stuff in progress around requesting funding, but I'm not really sure. He hasn't created PRs yet, so I'm not really sure what the status there is.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you and me and Bosch are the ones working most on the milestone 16, and I mean, I feel like we've talked about it a lot. So if there's nothing new like a PR we need to review, we can probably just save that for later to talk about.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, are there any open PRs for that one? I'm trying to look here and see. We got some new PRs from Paulo here. Payment request. Let's see.
I think so. So Bosch said he's working on the payment request format page first, because he said then that would cover a bunch of stuff that he then would not have to cover in the other pages. So it would seem doing that first is not directly
Makes sense.
daily spending wallet, but it simplifies that work to make it.
Yeah.
He has a master plan, and we only get peeks into his mind.
Well, I think the payment request format page is actually almost good to go. I think it was just you and I both commented about the font size and those images. So, but setting that aside, I think that the content in that page is about ready to go.
Yeah, I think it's a really good update from the previous one. And for everyone else here, something clever that Bosch did here. So this is the page about all the different formats that wallets accept for initiating payments or transferring payment data. And there are a whole bunch of different ones. And so he built in a way for people to test their app compatibility. So as each format is explained, there's a QR code. So if you just, if you work on a wallet or so, or if you want to test like Blue Wallet or something else, for every format here, you just hold the camera up to the screen and see if your wallet responds in a good way. Like a basic Lightning invoice, that will pretty much always work. But the further you go down, kind of, the more tricky it is, like an LN URL withdraw or so might not work on all wallets. And that is a very quick way to just go through the page, all the formats, and just test for support. Yeah, my only comment here was Lightning address, whether that's a separate thing, because it's not. It uses LN URL, but it is not LN URL spec.
No, it is LN URL. I left you a comment on there. It is LN URL.
But it didn't come. Well, it's. I mean, isn't Lightning address just a way to turn an email address format into a LN URL?
No, it's actually LN URL has a repository of like they're called LUDs instead of like BIPs. They're LUDs, or so LUD 16 is actually Lightning address, as far as I understand. It's called it's called paying to static internet identifiers, and it pretty clearly lays out a username at domain and translating that into LN URL. So my understanding of it was that Lightning address is just the friendly user-facing name for LUD16 paying to static internet identifiers.
Well, that's kind of weird because I thought I think somebody from Zebedee kind of made a big deal about inventing Lightning addresses. So
Andre Neves, and he's
okay.
and he's also the author. If you click the link I put in the chat, he's also the author of LUD16, or he's one of the authors along with Fiat Jeff. So
okay, so it was kind of a collaboration in a way, probably between them. Okay, and then it was just presented as something separate. It was not presented like, hey, here's Lightning address, part of LNURL, but here's this thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's like I think the developers, if you want to understand the spec as a developer, you are going to refer to the LNURL repository. But if you're someone who wants to learn the value of Lightning address or whatever, then you would go to lightningaddress.com. So I think it's just I think it's like same information but targeted to different audiences.
Cool. Then I was wrong, and you're right. And this page is more ready to go than I thought. Awesome. Yeah, cool. Awesome. That is good. And yeah, so I'm going to try to just pick up more pages and try to get through them fairly quickly. Maybe I'll pick up privacy. I don't think anybody has shown a strong interest in that one either. Just try to get through some of that stuff. So we can keep moving. Okay. What else do you want to talk about? Should we get into accessibility now? Or because we have the page about accessibility here also. Unfortunately, Mo is not here.
Sure.
So I guess big picture, accessibility is pretty important. But, oh, there's Bosch. Hey there.
What's going on, guys?
Hey, we were just talking about a few things. We just discussed the payment request format page, and what's that in your background? That looks kind of weird. It's a naked laser eye orange person with a.
He's got a Bitcoin. Tattoo? Yeah, I don't know. I just seen it on the internet. Thought it was kind of cool.
It's like a sumo wrestler.
Yeah, I just seen this on Twitter earlier. But yeah, sorry. What were you saying? The payment format?
Okay. So we were just discussing that page and how it's really good. It's just like a minor thing about the disclaimers in the images. I think that was the only thing, basically.
Yeah, they're not that visual. You can't really see them. I need to probably update that, or I could just remove them. I don't know if they're necessary.
Yeah, just put one at the top in that info tip box, and that's probably fine. I'm going to keep cracking up here with that image in your background.
It's just like I don't know, I just put it there in case someone paid it and they just turned around and they like blamed us for losing money or something. I don't know. Just kind of.
Yeah. I had that exact same fear with the BIP21, the Bitcoin QR.dev website. And ultimately, Pavlonex just told me to not worry about it.
Yeah.
I think it's a sort of thing. It's a tough question because it's like if you're asking them to scan it, it's like, yeah, you are asking them to interact with it. But there's also QR codes all over the Bitcoin design website. So it's kind of like, well, do we need to put warnings on those QRs as well? And I don't know, but I would kind of think just like one warning at the top of the page would probably be sufficient.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. All right, I'll just do that then. I'll update the photos tonight.
Yeah. And then we had a question about, you said after the payment request format page, then you had a plan to tackle some other pages, which was requesting and funding and onboarding, or some mixture of those topics, right?
Yeah, just tackling the requesting page for now. I'm going to keep it small, so do that for now, and then was going to tackle the funding page after that. I have quite a bit of copy done for both of them, but they're just kind of in draft modes, I guess. But I just wanted to get that the formats page done first, and then that's like a lot of the heavy lifting in the requesting page will be kind of linked off to that page instead of including all those details and having to explain that kind of stuff in the reference design. But yeah, so tackling the requesting page and then going to tackle the funding page unless someone else wanted to, but that was my plan for this week.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I'll tackle the first use page. And back to a point Stephen earlier made, then is our first use page right now is super generic. But if we want this to be a really good prototype of a fairly realistic product, then that needs to be a lot more detailed. So I'll try to tackle that one then.
Okay. You can put me down for backup and recovery. That landing one, and I know my name is already on the section landing page one, but like I kind of want to finalize that one like later on in the process after we've kind of gotten the completed prototype in a Figma file and all that.
Yep, I concur.
Yeah, I'm just mostly focused on copy for now, and then once we get that prototype done, focus on probably updating the images that need to be updated. But yeah, just focusing on copy. I've done a lot of simplifying for the requesting page, so I think it's going to be quite a bit smaller, but I think it still kind of conveys what needs to be conveyed. So.
Yeah. And as far as the discussion of whether this prototype should be part of the UI kit, I don't think it should. There's another reason that Wisdom, one of the designers, he has been working in the background on an Android version of the UI kit. And then some other people on Twitter contacted me like, hey, I'd want to contribute to Wisdom's Android UI kit version. So there's some stuff going on. So I think the UI kit should just focus on being a really good UI kit, maybe with having that flexibility of supporting both Android and iOS. And then this prototype Figma file can be the best prototype Figma file it can be.
I agree.
It's just going to get so messy. I don't even know how to handle this. Android,
and also with prototypes, you're going to have redundancy in prototypes too. Like you're going to have like a prototype is supposed to tell a story about a user flow, and so like you're going to have the same screen but with 5 different pieces of text on it as the screen state changes, right? And that's something that you need in a prototype, but in a UI kit, you don't want that redundancy. You want to, I think about it more like, individual components and things like that. So I would agree. Yeah, the prototype is going to be too redundant for a kit.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be cool to have on the maybe a about page on the UI kit Figma file that linked off to like things that have been built with the UI kit, which we could put a link off to the prototype there if people wanted to look at it.
Yep, I have a lot more work cut out for all of this stuff. There's also a heavily armed clown is working on Arctic, that multi-sig vault type of deal. He posted in introductions, and we've been going back and forth a little bit on Twitter or late last week. The join market is basically web UI is being built on the UI kit pretty much with some slight variation. So they're both desktop applications. So it's more stuff to link to. Okay, cool. By the way, I will be mostly out next week and the week after because we have guests visiting and there are holidays here. So I'm going to be very, very minimal. So I'm going to try to get whatever is important out of the way this week.
Sounds good to me.
So, okay, should we dive into more privacy security pages or tackle a different topic?
We still have the issues up for them, don't we? We just get the milestone up.
So we have Jason here, so we could go into the accessibility stuff.
Yeah. I'd be fine with moving on because the 3 of us have left like exhaustive comments on the Figma file and all that. So it's probably just better to discuss those pages when we're ready to work on them.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Accessibility. So as I was just about to say, Bosch, when you came in, accessibility has been a thought and the importance has been recognized since the beginning of the design guide, but then nothing has happened. As it takes sometimes, other things have priority and it takes a while sometimes to get around to things. It's also been a little bit tricky to figure out just where to start with this whole thing. But so now we have, Mo is unfortunately not here, like I said. We have a page here, which Mo and I started where we did some accessibility testing. We watched some YouTube videos, how to set up your phone for accessibility testing. We tapped around and we found a bunch of issues. and we tried to do a bit of research and put this page together.
Hey, great work on that, by the way.
Oh, awesome. I assume that there's a lot of stuff that I don't know. So it's awesome that you think it's great work. Make sure to also say when it's totally not.
Yeah,
what's
no,
missing
I mean,
and all
getting
that.
started is the hardest part, right? But there is
Yeah.
lots of areas of specialized domain that are very nuanced, and there's a lot of things that I don't know as well, right? And I've been doing this for 12 years, so I'm just congratulate you both on getting started and learning how to set up your mobile environment to test for accessibility. I think that's a really good start. So.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's actually not that difficult. There was one 10-minute video where a guy basically just explains how to do it and he shows it. And then afterwards, you're pretty much ready to go. And the tests are not that difficult either. Even with just 10 minutes of tapping around, you can catch a whole bunch of stuff.
Yep.
And then the nuance is really the difficult thing, because accessibility is typically things that we don't even know they're there, problems we don't have. And those are the hardest ones to solve for. And you can't even imagine them, right?
Right.
What is it like to not see a certain comment? Yeah. Yeah. And then, I also asked on Twitter and Reddit about like, hey, accessibility in Bitcoin, what's the status? Anybody have to share some stories? And it's just absolute radio silence. People either confused it with accessibility, usability, and talked about totally different things, or it was just nothing came back.
Or maybe those websites aren't accessible. The websites you posted them on aren't accessible, and so
yeah, very well.
Nobody who knows about these things is using the websites. I don't know. I'm just joking, but I don't know. That's true.
Okay. So we have this introduction here, why it's important. Also, there are various reasons for it. Then the different categories. We try to put in videos here where people actually talk about the needs they have to make it more practical. Then we have tips and examples, which is really just the basic stuff around labeling and the right order and providing different ways to do something. And making sure, like, just some tips on making sure you implement operating system-wide accessibility settings. If somebody wants more contrast or bigger text, then just give them more contrast or bigger text, right? And then there are a bunch of links to tools to hopefully get people started. And so that's kind of the idea, was this is kind of covers a bunch of good areas, and then hopefully over time we can build on top of it. And not dissimilar is, I think, UX research, which also started very, very slowly in the guide, but then, has gained more momentum as things move forward. So hopefully, yeah. But this page would be great to get more feedback on. And if you guys could also do some testing, would be super helpful. Otherwise, we can put this live and
yeah, I can certainly do some more testing. I've just been extremely heads down at my current job, so haven't had much time to do any in-depth testing, but I would be glad to jump in and do a bit more here.
Awesome. But I'm curious to hear how you go about that one, about testing.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on which standard you're testing towards, right? I mean, if you're testing towards CAC 2.1 AA, I mean, you can set up a spreadsheet and just look through each individual item related to the standard, or you can, use an automated tool and kind of find some of the low-hanging fruit issues and kind of look around those low-hanging fruit issues. And a lot of times that will reveal some other things that you didn't see before. You can just take a look through the code and see, what they have implemented, and that'll give you a good idea. There's really a bunch of different approaches here, but to get a thorough accessibility review, you really got to do like a combination of manual and automated testing with a couple of different tools. And I would probably be using the ARC toolkit, which is something that I'm familiar with and that I'm currently using right now. So it's just easy for me. But there's a lot of other ones out there. There's Axe. There's the Wave toolbar, which you guys recommended. It's a good one. It doesn't always catch everything. Sometimes it catches a lot of false positives. But it's really easy to kind of look at and see immediately, like, oh, here's some accessibility issues, right? So it's good for beginners.
Yeah. And how do you do the visual testing? Do you have some And for example, I know in iOS, in accessibility, I can, I have all these color settings for different needs. Do you just turn one of them off and use
Yeah,
an
usually for
app and
that,
then see
I'll
what
just make
happens?
sure that the accessibility API is being leveraged in a way that leverages those operating system accessibility settings. So, if you have an app that is a native app, it should be able to leverage that. So, you can go in and change your contrast settings, and if it does not apply within the app, then there's probably something that is not configured properly.
Mhm. Yeah. And so let's say somebody cannot see green, or I don't even know, I'm just making stuff up. It has some deficiency, right? Is there a way that you can set things up that you will be able to see whether something's wrong yourself?
I mean, there's so many different nuances and types of visual disabilities when it comes to like low vision and color blindness that, to be honest, I'm not an expert in that particular domain, but I do know people that are, and there's lots of argument back and forth about different things because there's so many different preferences, right, for different disability types, right? And I forget exactly which ones cause it to be difficult to read, black text on a white background and vice versa, right? Like there's particular preferences depending on your disability, and they can be conflicting sometimes. But I do know the folks that wrote WCAG 2.1 AA and the folks that are now writing WCAG 3.0. I mean, they're very smart folks, and I trust their judgment in that regard. But yeah, like luminance is a big issue, and relative luminance is a huge issue for like printed text. But now that we have mobile devices, I'm wondering, maybe there is some deficiencies in WCAG 2.1 AA with regards to being able to differentiate, relative luminance as well. But yeah, it's hard to say. I would say, if we just need to pick a standard, and if you pick a standard and stick to it, I think that as long as you're trying to meet the intent of the standard, then you'll be doing well.
Yeah. So because as you said, it's kind of tricky. You have to figure out what you want to shoot for, right? So Mo and I have been working on this accessibility test plan here, which is still kind of rough. But the way that we try to frame it in, I think we're still in the level where we try to just get the super low hanging fruit, just the things that where somebody tries to use it and they just get completely blocked. Like I tried to use Breeze and there was no way to via voice control or voiceover to exit a modal. Like you're stuck there forever in that modal, right? Sucks.
Yeah, and Breeze is using a pretty accessible framework to begin with. I believe they're using Flutter, which has a lot of accessibility built into it. So
yeah, and it was only one particular modal. I think I forgot which one it was.
Yeah,
but
and that's
I think
all it
that's
takes,
the
right?
type of stuff, right?
Yeah, one modal that has a keyboard trap, and suddenly you're stuck, and you cannot get out of it, right? Or you can't get into it with voiceover, for example.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of the stuff still. And then what we also tried to kind of figure out is ideally for everything we find, we can file an issue with that project. So we pick, open source self-custodial projects primarily that we might use at custodial and company, whatever, the enterprise apps or whatever, as to find good examples of how to do things. But what our focus still really is the open source self-custodial. And we tried for everything that we do, we try to be super proactive and file issues for everything we find so they can very easily fix them and address them. So connect kind of the research part together with creating a good case study for our testing that we can share with people. It makes it easier for them to do the same, but also very practically file issues with those projects and quickly get things improved out there in the wild.
Yeah, that's really important, notifying each individual self-custodio app, the issues we find, for sure.
And then you said you're familiar with Breeze. Have you also looked into other applications and how they do things?
I have a little bit, but not entirely from an accessibility perspective, just bandwidth limited. So, but yeah, Breeze was, built with Flutter, and I was talking with one of the main developers about it when they first introduced it, and explaining that there's some accessibility features that he could leverage there. But I'm not sure, what the current status is.
Yeah, for my testing, it's overall pretty good. Just a bunch of unlabeled buttons, and then that one modal issue that I came across.
Yeah.
Overall, pretty good from what I saw.
Unlabeled buttons, though, are pretty big, I would say.
Yeah, it's like, hey, there's a button. Do you want to press it? We're not going to tell you what it is. Like,
you have no idea what it's going to do.
Okay, so this is kind of where we are. So I'm curious, Daniel, Shah, Bosch, Stephen, what do you think of all of this stuff? What do you want to do? What do you not want to do? Where do you think we should take this next? What's in your mind? Oh, well, the website. We haven't talked about the website, right? But
yeah, I mean, it sounds like coming into this call, I divided this in my mind into two projects. Now it kind of seems like 3 projects. So one project is you got your accessibility page, which is like, okay, kind of teaching designers and developers of Bitcoin products how to be accessible. I went ahead and approved that PR. Looked good to me. I'm not an accessibility expert, but it looked good to me, so I approved that. You got your other project, which is making the Bitcoin design website more accessible, and that's kind of an ongoing thing. And I think for that, again, we need to pick a standard, define what it is we want to do, and then just kind of create issues for specific things we find that deviate from that spec and bang them out. And that's what I was trying to do with the color issue. Seems like you have a third thing here, which is an accessibility test plan. And I think this would be real cool for a campaign. I mean, we should do something kind of like bitcoinqr.dev with this, and make a campaign to make Bitcoin projects more accessible, and make a little graph. It's like, do you want to test this wallet? Yada yada yada. You test the wallet, make an issue or something, logging your results and all of that, and you get credit for it. So I think that would be real cool. But we just need to keep working on kind of laying out the methodology for testing these wallets.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I was thinking that totally in line with what Stephen was saying there, and especially with the campaign stuff. And I think you could even further break it down into like if it's like voice challenges or visual challenges or something like that. So things that people care about, it could be kind of isolated, because those things itself are kind of like big issues that people have to deal with. So maybe someone who is like visually impaired just says like, hey, let me do the test for a bunch of these applications for that thing that I care about versus the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Or mobility, I guess that's another one as well.
You and your sneaky name changes.
I had to mix it up a little bit, this time around.
Yeah, I'm the same boat as Stephen. I'm not really accessibility expert. I have been meaning to go over the PR in a bit more detail. It does look pretty good, but I haven't given it my approval yet because I wanted to kind of go look into some of the things a bit more myself. But yeah, it's looking pretty great. Like, I learned a lot from reading it. Because I'm pretty green when it comes to a lot of accessibility stuff, like many people in the design community, it seems. But it's looking good. That'd be cool to have some kind of like Bitcoin QR type campaign to help more apps get accessibility built in. I've been meaning to do some accessibility stuff on Android, because I think you've mostly focused with iOS. I got Graphene on my phone, but it's like, I don't know if the accessibility tools are like like Android level kind of accessibility tools. So I might have to get my old Pixel and maybe run them on that. But I might do some testing this week sometime.
Yeah, do you think it would be helpful to do kind of a accessibility testing workshop or something, where we just gather and everybody sets up their phones and we just, afterwards everybody's kind of good to go on their own, so you don't have to figure it out on your own, basically?
That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Could be a learning Bitcoin and design topic for that call series.
Yeah, because we don't have a topic for tomorrow's, so we could do that. tomorrow, if or we could do that like later. Another thing might be maybe we do that project. Maybe we do that on the next Learning Bitcoin and Design call. That's going to be like a month from now, because that would give you a little more time to prep for that sort of stuff.
Well, what are you going to do to talk about tomorrow, or are we going to talk about tomorrow?
Yeah, figure it out.
I mean, if we're just focusing on iOS, then I can give a basic demonstration how to do basic testing. With
sure. Yeah. Hey, I didn't want to put
control.
I didn't want to put you on the spot, but if you're ready, then yeah, let's roll tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's the way I figured it out was like I said, there was a 10-minute video on YouTube that the guy just showed it, and then it was easy. Maybe there's something similar for Android, and then it's pretty easy to pick up. Maybe Jason knows.
For iOS, I'd recommend Paul Adams' work. He has a lot of good resources on how to set up iOS mobile environments for accessibility testing. He has a lot of videos on YouTube as well. But for Android, it's a little more tricky just because there's so many different flavors of Android. But I do know that you can install some of these tools, like TalkBack. You should be able to install it on your graphene device and your these other modified operating systems like that. But it's going to work a little bit differently.
So do you need, so what I did with iOS, I just enabled the accessibility settings, and then I just used the app and took screenshots as I went along.
Yeah. So for iOS, you have VoiceOver, and then you have Zoom, and then you have high contrast modes, and there's a bunch of other things you can enable as well for like switch controls and mobility disabilities, right? So folks that can't use a mouse, maybe they use a switch control, like a pedal on the floor or something like that, or joystick. Those type of things. You can set up a switch control mode in iOS that will allow you to minimize the functionality of the gestures, but only and use an input device to navigate around the screen. Those are some of the big things in iOS, I'd say.
The switch control. Okay, I'm taking some notes here. I haven't looked at that one yet. Yeah. We just looked at. I mean, we are just really, covering the basics here and hoping that we get more sophisticated over time.
Yeah, I mean, testing domains is really, you really got to think about it because, are you testing on iOS and Android? Are you doing mobile testing? That's completely different than doing, desktop web accessibility testing, right? Where you have all these tools and resources available that make it a little bit easier. But, then again, if you do some really basic testing for your gestures to ensure that, when you have VoiceOver or TalkBack turned on, you can navigate to all of the interactive elements on the screen, that they all are labeled, and that they're following like a logical order from left to right, top to bottom, for example. And then you don't have any keyboard traps or any, gesture traps where, you open up a mole or something and you can't get out of it. Sound like there was on Breeze. That's going to cover most of the issues that are going to block somebody with a visual disability or mobility disability from navigating and using the app. Now, it gets a little trickier with low vision and some of these other more nuanced disabilities, cognitive disabilities, things like that, that there's a lot more nuance to. But if you're just trying to catch all the blockers for somebody who's using a screen reader, who might be blind, or who is using a switch control, or maybe they can't use they can't use a mouse, or they can't use gestures that well, so they use some sort of input device. Then just testing those things is going to catch all that, right? And then it's also going to catch anything that's not showing up in text that would be outputted to a refreshable Braille display, for example. So if you have buttons that aren't labeled, that is not going to display on your Braille display either. So,
oh, interesting. Yeah, and there's some random stuff too. Like I think it was in Blue Wallet, when you export, it reads out the recovery phrase like a sentence. So you have to be really quick in order to write that one out or do anything with it, So just rattle through it.
Yeah, thinking about cognitive load as well, right? Like, because as you know, if you're a blind screen reader user and you're navigating through a website and you're having to remember like kind of a mental map of where things are, so you know you keep adding to that stack every time you're required to remember something, and you know if you add too much to that stack, it can break down. But you know, most folks that use the screen reader actually listen to it at a very high rate of speed and are just very adept at memorizing the right information they need to be able to navigate through complex tasks and applications. So you'd be surprised.
In that one video, this lady, and she's actually an accessibility engineer at Apple, and she said she listens to the screen reader at 700 words per minute. So I did found an online screen reader that allows to read text that fast. You can just type in the words per minute, and it's just insane. It's nuts.
Yeah, 700 words per minute is unintelligible for most people. Yeah, that's just.
Yeah.
But I can see how, because I tried, like I when I was testing your PR to do the accessibility improvements to the Bitcoin Design website, I set up the accessibility on my MacBook, and like I set up the screen reader, and I tried closing my eyes and just kind of like using the keyboard navigation, like just kind of tabbing through the page and like letting the screen reader navigate me through the website. And it's like, you get tired and bored of just listening to it be like, nav bar, nav item 1, da 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 da, and it just, so I could totally see how someone would just get tired of listening to that kind of stuff over and over and over again, and just crank up the speed so fast.
Yeah, that's also why some people get very annoyed with redundant descriptions and things like that, right? But some people really want that, so there's kind of a balance that needs to be struck there when you're labeling things, to make sure that you're describing them with enough detail so people understand, the name of the control, the purpose of the control, and its state, right? But not too much information to where it's just redundant, and they're having to add to that cognitive stack that they have.
That makes sense. So there's a certain amount of brevity, I guess, that you need to have when you're describing controls and navigation and things like that. I'm guessing it probably helps to be more verbose when you're describing like a photograph, like in the alt text or something like that, but in the controls, more brevity.
Yeah, and even most of the photographs or images that appear on websites, most of them are just eye candy. So even a lot of those, you would use like alt equals quote quote just to like make the screen reader ignore that image altogether.
And do a lot of the accessibility tools like Arc and Wave and stuff like that, like if they see just empty quotes, do they regard that as just being kind of like a useless image? So it's kind of okay if it doesn't have an alt tag?
If you need an alt tag.
But yeah, what I'm saying is like, do in the accessibility standard, do they if the alt tag is empty, is that okay? Yeah,
alt equals quote quote it'll be ignored by all screen readers.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's intentional. It's like when there's no alt text, then it could be anything. When there's an empty one, that it was intentionally declared as an image without information, and it can be ignored.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Null, N-U-L-L. Sorry.
Yeah.
Null alt text, alt equals quote quote. Is universally recognized as ignore this.
So that's a good point, because it means that you should kind of use discretion when you're declaring alt text on website, and only putting alt text where it's actually kind of necessary or useful.
Correct. Yeah, if it's a meaningful image, you're trying to convey something to the user through that image that's not already described on the page in text, then you can use an alt tag and provide a brief description.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess one more thing about this accessibility test and everything. We can take our time. We can work on accessibility for the next year, as long as we make, if we're all very busy, if there's tons of stuff going on, as long as we kind of, slowly make progress and help, build up a good foundation, and more people kind of, come along and help out, and applications get better, Like we don't have to, put everything aside and try to make this happen right away.
Yeah, I see this as a long-term focus that will never go away, in my opinion.
Can we talk a little bit about the WCAG3 thing?
Yeah.
No, it's good. I was wanting to talk about the PR that I'd made, and
Yeah.
there's several good comments on that. And just for clarification, I wasn't trying to get that PR rammed through quickly. I really just made it because I thought it would be easier for us to actually look at the changes and discuss. I thought it'd be just easier to see it on the website so we could evaluate it better. So I'm totally cool with just closing that if we come up with a better idea. But yeah, I mean, so for context, yeah, we were talking about text contrast on the website. We, at least I guess on the WCAG2 spec, we failed for text contrast, according to Wave and Arc, the testing tools. So we failed specifically for link color contrast. So we were discussing different ways to look at that. And so I went ahead and made a PR that would just be like, if we wanted to match WCAG to AA rating as defined, this is how we would do it. And I think, Christoph, you brought up the point about WCAG3, and they use this acronym, this other annoying acronym, ARC, APTA, whatever.
APCA, APCA.
Yeah. APCA. I liked it. I mean, I read the APCA thing. I think it makes a ton of sense. I like it. It's really complicated to kind of follow a lot of it because there's a lot of nuance to it, which just kind of really makes the APCA testing tools really necessary. And I found one, and it was really good. And we would still have to change things on our website, like our orange buttons with the white text. According to APCA, we could have orange buttons with white text, but we're going to have to either make it bold, and we're going to have to bump the font size up a little bit. But the point is we can get away with a lot more things under the WCAG3, APCA, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm very much a fan of the new methodology. My one concern with WCAG3 at the moment is that it is very much a working draft. I haven't been following the political process of it, but it looks to me like it's probably not going to be finalized until at least 2023. At least just kind of skimming the pages. So I guess I was just curious to get a kind of temperature check on should we be strictly following something like WCAG2 that has been clearly defined, or should we be aiming to meet an evolving standard and just kind of recognize that there's some gray area here and that things may be subject to change over the next year or two? I don't know what the best approach is here. So that's kind of what I wanted to figure out from everybody.
Yeah, and I just want to put in a couple more things that I put in my comment here. So these WCAG sounds so stupid. They were released in 2008, and since then we had Retina screens, and it's just the iPhone screen contrast ratio have increased from iPhone 3G that was 200:1 to iPhone 13 at 2 million to 1. So it's not the same for desktops and laptops. Those screens are not as crazily evolved. But the thing is, just technology can now reproduce color contrast much better and much clearer with Retina displays. So I'm just really questioning whether these 2008 very generic, there are two contrast numbers that have to be followed, and they're 14 years old now, if those are still relevant. So for me, using those newer, even if they're not finalized, using the newer standard would be the more appropriate choice here, as guidelines, not as fixed, rules.
I'll go ahead and say that in terms of the color contrast, I don't really think that the iPhones having higher color contrast really has. I could be wrong on this because I don't know if that played into the WCAG3, but iPhone having higher color contrast, I don't really think has much bearing on the actual the color contrast of text on the website, because you have color contrast of text in a theoretical sense. I took this RGB color for the background color, and then I took this RGB color for the text color, and then I'm going to compare those and get a ratio. So that's color contrast, like in that theoretical sense. And then you have well, can the monitor that you're looking at actually accurately display those colors or not? And 10 years ago, yeah, I mean, the monitors were a lot crappier and phones were a lot crappier. And so even if, like, yeah, your color contrast was, you might take 2 hex codes and get a specific color contrast out of that, but it's debatable if the monitor you're looking at it on is even capable of displaying those colors or not. Because sometimes monitors just can't display the full palette, as we as designers, all know. So that's one concern. But I think that if a color is inaccessible, like if the contrast is too low for a given color, I feel like that contrast is too low, regardless of whether the monitor is good or bad.
But not necessarily. Let's
Yeah.
say they tested a color 14 years ago and people said they couldn't read it or see it. And then today, because the monitor's better, they're like, yeah, I can see this. Like somehow you have to verify whether people can see it or not. And the different technology could result in that difference.
So it sounds like you're almost wondering, if I can repeat it the way I heard it, it sounds like you're saying that what if when they were performing those accessibility tests to begin with 10 years ago, what if the device that they were testing it on, wasn't a good device, was flawed, and so ultimately the test data would be bad as a result because you weren't getting the pure results from that device.
Yeah, I mean,
getting the best results.
Yeah, the real world testing, right? That's always the thing, how people see it, and if the technology is better, then maybe more people. I just don't know, right? I'm just trying to understand how to read these things, and technology changes, right? It's just like, we have now tools, headphones that can, remove background noise, so I can hear certain things better because, whatever. So those are just the things, and I feel like 14 years is a long time.
Yeah, I wouldn't throw out the standard though just because it's 14 years old, because there's been some updates since then. Well, CAG 2.1 was June 2018, so that's the most recent applicable guideline that's out there. And as far as contrast goes, and luminance and new types of screens and things like that, yeah, I agree that there probably is some advancements in the screen technology that do make some colors easier to perceive now on different screens. But also just think about like relative luminance as well, right? So if you're outside on a bright sunny day and you're trying to look at something on your iPhone, even though it has a really really good screen, some things are going to be harder to read in that environment versus sitting in a dark room, for example.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to go with the WCAG 3 color guidelines, I mean, there's nothing that says you have to go with any guidelines here, right? I mean, this is all open source development, right? So we can do whatever we want. I don't want to push you guys in a certain direction unless you're asking for my feedback. But, I've seen companies and organizations take parts of different standards and mesh them together. So you could say, let's use WCAG 2.1 AA for everything except for color, and let's look at WCAG 3 for color. And that would be something that's, not outside the realm of acceptable.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that approach. For me, it was more, being very intentional about it, right, and being appropriate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if, like, in some article, it said too, if you have like a government, if you build a website for, what's it called? Like retirees, a government website for retirees. Clearly, you need to be very sensitive to accessibility because your audience just, is going to have more problems seeing and hearing and other things correctly.
Yeah.
Well, it's different if you build like for 8-year-olds or something. Yeah. So the intentionality is the key thing for me.
Yeah, and another thing to remember is like, I mean, it's really easy. I think I fall into this trap myself a lot too, where you have a specific spec or requirement you're trying to meet, and then there's like a tool that lets you, check for compliance with this thing, and then you run the tool, and it's like, oh my god, the screen is filled with freaking red X's. I have to tick every single box on this spec until this whole screen is green. And it's like, yeah, sometimes these automated tools, can't always capture the nuance of situations. And so we have to take our thinking outside of these kind of checking tools, or whether it's for, SEO or accessibility or legibility, readability, whatever. It's like these tools, are things that you can use to help you, but the tool can't be seen as like the ultimate truth. You have to kind of apply human nuance to it. So, I mean, if we want to try and look more towards the APCA standard, I'd be fine with that. We might want to, we might want to kind of come up with our own like Bitcoin design accessibility spec, and maybe that's just a document in the meta repo or something like that, or just a page on the design guide where we kind of outline like, yeah, for these specific things, we refer to the WCAG2 standard, or for these specific things like color, we look to the APCA standard. And as long as it's not a moving target within our community, I think it's fine. If we want to come up with our own accessibility guidelines for Bitcoin design, kind of pulling from the pieces that we like from other places, that's fine. I think as long as we're being intentional and documenting what those guidelines are.
Yeah. So we just hit the hour. We can talk a little bit as long as we want to, I guess. It's just fine. So that sounds good to me. I was wondering if we could actually make a decision here on the prefers contrast CSS media query. That seems like an easy one. Like somebody wants higher contrast, yeah, give it to them. Just.
I'm not sure about it. I'm a little torn on that one. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, yeah, on the one hand, it's where you're coming from. It's like, if somebody wants the higher contrast, they have the option within their operating system to turn that on. At the same time, though, there should be a certain kind of bare minimum level of contrast that I think is good.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. I was just watching a little demo on the first contrast the other day for one of my colleagues. And yeah, it's definitely a very cool media query. But once again, you want to make sure that the minimum contrast you're using on the site or the mobile application is meeting some standard. And the prefers contrast is really for more edge cases of folks who really need a high contrast or need a very specific combination of colors in order to be able to read the content.
Yeah, makes sense. One of the, I don't know how you guys go about this. One of the things, like I always hear Apple has amazing accessibility. So sometimes I just look at what they do. Just take a screenshot, pick some colors, go to Apple website or so, or find some other website where I hear good things or so. I feel like that's also kind of just look at companies that clearly do this really well and are also well known for good design, and just kind of pick some things from there. Like that's an easy route.
Yeah, that's certainly one path.
Okay, cool. What else should we chat about, if anything? Anything wrap up? Anything make this more practical? I'm just copying all the links here from the sidebar real quick. Later, UTXO Club.
Nothing that I can think of. I just, the main thing is, I feel like, before, maybe before we think about other accessibility, reviews of pages, we just clarify in a document somewhere what our accessibility guidelines are going to be. Might be a good next step.
Yeah, other than this, the PR we just merged and the color one, I personally don't know how much further I could push it from here. Somebody more experienced would have to, or somebody with more time to test it on different devices would have to come in. But I feel like from my side, I don't really know how much further I can push it on the website itself.
Just a real minor thing, not a big issue, but I just made an issue for it on the repo. But just creating like a sitemap for Bitcoin design. I don't think we have one. I was looking at it I was just looking into some SEO stuff, but apparently it's pretty good for accessibility because it gives a pretty good like overview of the site and makes it a little bit easier to navigate some things.
Mhm.
Yep.
So creating one of them would be useful. Good for SEO, good for accessibility as well. Just a small thing.
Yeah, that speaking of the standards, I mean, that would help us meet multiple ways, which is part of the WCAG 2.1. Yeah, having a sitemap or another way to get to things on the site.
Yeah, good one. Yeah,
Navigation.
we can turn that one into an action. Should be fairly easy to automatically generate that one via Jekyll. Basically outputting the site navigation again in a dedicated page, and that's it. Some slide formatting. Yeah, sounds good. And then Mo and I will try to wrap up this accessibility test, and then just okay, I'll have to stitch that together. Okay, so we'll just try to finish up that plan and share it and do a little bit of testing. And then should we try to do the accessibility setup for tomorrow?
If you're down to do it, yeah, that'd be great.
It's not going to be super professional, but we'll probably get something done.
Learning Bitcoin and design colors are rarely super professional, so that's okay.
But we just need to cover the basics, right? We need to get started, cover the basics. Maybe a few people will have actually done a quick accessibility test after this call, and that'll be a step forward.
Yeah.
What time are you thinking of doing that?
Let me pull up the issue and figure out when that is. Depends on where you are in the world, but let me just I'll get you a link to that.
Yeah, it's 9 a.m. here, and I'm on vacation. I'm about to fix up my house, but this is very interesting stuff. I definitely would like to be involved if I can.
Awesome.
I dropped the link in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right.
So that would be 7 p.m. Central Eastern Europe time.
Yeah, I won't be able to come, but it'd be good if you guys could record it. I'll watch it after.
Will do.
It's at 1 a.m. for me, so it's a bit late.
Okay. And I'll just plan to do a basic setup, how to set up voice control and voiceover on iPhone, maybe get people to look at accessibility settings and just pull up an app and kind of tap around, and maybe other people can do the same at the same time, and we can just talk about these basic things.
Cool.
And then I'll try to see if I can get the same setup for Android. Just really basic stuff.
If I find any good resources on that ahead of time, should I just post them in GitHub somewhere?
Or Slack, the accessibility channel.
I'll just put it in the accessibility channel.
Awesome.
Ooh, I'm not in that one.
Missing out.
Yep. I'm in there now. All right, cool.
I got to head off as well, guys. I got another meeting, so I'll see you during the week. But yeah,
cool.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining, and
Later.
We'll talk about everything else on GitHub and Slack. And thanks for anyone who's tuning in here too. And thanks for Jason for joining, especially while you're on vacation.
I appreciate it.
yeah. Cheers, Jason.
All right, later, everybody.